All right, guys. Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this interview with Jeff Fisher. I could not be more excited. I put a lot of information out on email and in the Facebook group about this interview and why I was excited about it. But ultimately, Jeff has been a part of this program. He's built a really successful agency over the last couple of years that he actually went on to sell. And so some really cool things to talk about in addition to Jeff's core know-how. But some of the stuff I'm super excited about, Jeff, is the fact that you sold the agency. I want to talk about that. And then, of course, the fact that you had this virtual team, how you pulled that off, how you structured it. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Jeff, thanks for joining us on this live interview.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to sharing with everybody.
Awesome. So let's start. If you could just tell us a little bit about your agency kind of at its peak prior to the sale, number of clients, active recurring revenue, that type of stuff.
Okay, so just so the video is dated correctly, the sale happened on January 1st of 2017. So when we're talking these numbers, these are real recent. This isn't like something I did 5 years ago.
2018, right? Was it the beginning of this year?
Actually, the 1st of December.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just rolling now into our third month since the sale. So at the time of sale, about 135 customers ranging from $37 to $2,200 a month in recurring revenue. That, to kind of give perspective, 80 of the 135 customers were paying less than $200 a month. So that is something that people need to note. A lot of customers between $450 and say $800, and then about a half a dozen above $1,000. The interesting thing that when I started with the mastermind group is the biggest thing I was working at was simply to get the number of customers, my average value of a customer, dramatically higher. So that was an undertaking. So as you learn here about the $1,000 client, that was one of the things I was striving for. So monthly recurring, somewhere between 38 and 42 a month, both childcare customers and some legacy local customers that I had as I started.
Awesome.
I started this business in online marketing in 2009, went into childcare in 2011.
Okay.
Was when I focused.
Awesome. So grew to about $42,000 per month in recurring revenue. One of your big lessons, it sounds like, was you had a lot of those lower ticket clients and kind of upping that to a higher threshold, making your life easier. I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we go. But so just tell us how you decided on that local childcare niche and kind of what drew you to that market.
Well, I just, at that time in my history, I was, studying Kevin Wilkie, Jody Underhill, Roland Frazier, and a lot of the conversation was around a niche. And this is early in the conversation about niches, because I can remember going and attending 2 different conferences where I got up on stage and I was the only guy in the room, like 100 people, 150 people. I'm the only guy in the room doing a niche. So that's changed a bit along the way, but I built out a list based on the influences in my life. So like Dan Kennedy says, you need to be able to tell where they flock together, so that's the National Association. So I set a criteria of what I wanted was something that had at least 2 national associations that I could attend their trade show or conference. For myself, I wanted a niche where the customer paid them either weekly or monthly. And so then my sending them a bill monthly should not be a big deal. So I know you, Josh, you're in plumbing, and you have to focus more on the lifetime value of a customer versus, hey, you're going to get $800 a month for the next 22 months if you get this child in the door today. Where a plumber may use you 5 times over 10 years, and each one's, $1,000 undertaking. So that's still a good customer. It's just a different approach that I use for selecting the niche. And then I just went down some other criteria. It had to be fun to work with, typically not a suit and tie crowd.
Okay.
So I wasn't looking for a suit and tie. So I wasn't really attracted to doctors or lawyers or dentists. And part of that is my background. Prior to starting my agency, I owned a landscape company with over 100 employees and about $5 million a year run rate. So, that I was just more comfortable around the service guys, or again, guys and gals without necessarily suit and tie. I also wanted a major, at least one major consultant in the industry that could send me referrals if they so desired. And so I was lucky enough to, my very first show in 2011, I showed for Chris Murray, who's the big name in the childcare space. And that was her very first conference. She had about 55 people at the conference. I was the only vendor, just to give you perspective, and I sold 10 websites at that show out of 55 people.
Nice.
Everybody came up to the table and said, can you build childcare websites? And I had just a simple binder, and I had 10 websites. We actually went out and built out 10 demo sites. So nobody asked me who my customer was. They all asked if I could build that type of website, so I could demonstrate that right in front of them. So that's kind of how I got into the niche. And the phone call came in actually September from Chris Murray and said, hey, you want to show up my little show here? And I'm like, I don't even have a website built yet. So in 5 weeks, we built out a website. We built out the 10 demo sites, added a ton of content. So it looked like my website had been around for a couple of years. And that was really what propelled us out the door.
That's awesome. And so kind of some cool things that you've done that, a lot of you guys, especially if you're in this process a little bit earlier, would be make a list that's customized to you, right? He talked about things that were unique to him, and that's some of the reasons he chose that niche. And then, of course, getting in with that consultant in the industry. I always talk about joining the associations, finding opportunities to speak, but there's also influencers in each of these niches. So if you can align yourself with one of those and they have their little breakout events, that was kind of what propelled Jeff to his first handful of clients in the niche. So, tell us a little bit about the service offering. Like, what were you actually doing for these local child care centers?
So full service online marketing. So everywhere from build their website to doing directory listings, doing backlinking, what we call local authority, which was writing a couple blog posts a month, and then not just hanging up the blog posts, but then actually distributing them out. So they had some value and created a certain amount of backlinks. I know I'm forgetting some reputation monitoring, some reputation marketing that never really has taken off for me, but just pretty much you ask it, and if it's within the realm of online marketing, we'll consider it. But intentionally kind of focusing on also the customer that's not going to be needing a weekly call or, a lot of hand holding as far as strategy and things like that. So kind of twice a year, we talk about strategy at the most. Some of these customers, I just met a customer today that we've had for 3 years that up to this point I had not ever spoke to. So
nice.
Again, that's the beauty of having a system, a process, and a team.
Absolutely.
So that was good.
So digital marketing, and I know that your model changed kind of towards the end. Was it? Was it a monthly package fee, or kind of what? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So moved more towards packages here towards the end. Have been always kind of a la carte, and. With the merger with Michael, that's still some of the stuff that we're sorting out is what are our packages and what needs to be a la carte, especially in the childcare niche. One of the things that we find is $650 to $950 you can pretty easily sell in the childcare niche. As soon as you get up in the $1,800, it's more of a struggle. Not to say that can't be done, but I was just really starting to get my legs under me when I decided to sell the business.
Yeah. And one of the things I updated in this iteration of the course is I always used to say 1,000 minimum. I do believe there are certain niches that lend themselves to more like a $750 price range. And so that's why I've said, just make the minimum 750 on your monthly recurring revenue. So
Absolutely. I think that's important to remember that. And again, if you're going after an attorney, you better be getting $3,500 a month or something.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about how you landed your first couple clients. And it's one thing to say, yeah, you went to 100 clients and now you sold the agency, but some of the most important traction happens at the beginning. I think you alluded to this with your partnership with Chris Murray, but just talk to us about those first 5 clients and how you got them.
Well, I'm going to talk out of the niche first.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk about when I first started my agency. Mm-hmm. So I went to a Dan Kennedy event, and I purchased at that time Mike Koenig's Firepower video course. That's how I got started. Now Josh is remembering that because we also had a common teacher back with what's the crazy man? Can't think of his name. That taught us all the nuts and bolts. Scott Gallagher.
I don't want to say his name because I don't think he's crazy, and I don't want him to hear this and say, think I called him.
No, it's a positive. I love Scott. It was at that time. He had a mind map that just so blew me away, and I was like, I'll never get to that. I mean, I was just absolutely convinced I would never get to that level of detail, and I'm there today. So coming out of that event, I came back, and this is really how I started my agency. I knew quite a few guys from my landscaping days. I approached 5 guys and asked them for $500 a month, and I would take over their online marketing for them, and they could keep that price, and anything I learned I would give to them along the way. So they were really the starting point of a different way of how I funded to get the agency going. And then after that, when I met Chris Murray, of course, I said I sold the 10 childcare centers. And then after that, it was the follow-up from the trade show that really got me propelled up to probably about 25 customers, working that pretty much exclusively. At that time, Chris was also willing to give out her attendee list, which she no longer does. So sure. I also knew who was attending. So the 2011, 2012, I was on the stage 10 minutes in 2011. In 2012, I spoke on her stage for an hour on online marketing. So pretty much that was really where it kind of started to launch. And so most of the customers, if I look back over time, came out of the trade shows. Okay. In the follow-up to the trade shows. At that time, I didn't have a list or anything. I really just started focusing on a list about 2 years ago. And building it out. And really when I started with 7-figure agency was when I really got myself committed to buying a list and then really working that list in the sense of, again, people I love to study. Dan Kennedy says your list should consist of 5 different lists merged together. Right. And just because you bought a Info USA list or whatever, that's only the starting point,
Get the Info USA list, get the consultant list, get the agency list, the association list, and kind of purge that.
Merge all that together. And in my case, I also found a vendor that sells lists specifically in the education niche. And so their numbers, interestingly enough, they don't track by revenue. They track by number of children authorized in a center. So once I knew that, I found my sweet spot that I wanted to grow the business in was childcare centers with 150 children or more or multiple locations.
Excellent. So I guess one thing I'll say, and this is awesome, the more of these interviews we do, the more we see different contexts, and everybody feels like to get the first 5 clients, you have to cold call. And sometimes that's what you have to do. But in Jeff's case, he strategically aligned himself with somebody in the niche he was targeting that had a lot of influence, and he was able to speak on their stage and be at their show, and that's where those first 5+ clients came from. And so, there's different ways to get some momentum behind yourself. I'm not suggesting that you just say, okay, I'm not going to do anything until I get that, because that boat may never come. But I'm of the opinion you want to go at it from a couple different angles, right? Do the calling. That way you're creating opportunity. join the association. That way you can get in front of people. Look for opportunities, strategic alliances like that, where you can, at one event, get lots of clients. So awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Jeff.
Well, and so to speak a little more to that, I couldn't cold call for my life. It's just something I am not able to do. Most people that know me pretty well, I'm a pretty big guy, I'm pretty stoic, so I really struggle with getting them excited. So I learned early on, if I could get any slight way that I had an excuse to call them, I was fine from there. So, if I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I was speaking to Chris Murray and she said you might need some help with your website, then I was fine. But just a cold call. But so what that did for me, and I just want to say this for everybody else, I immediately knew starting this, I had to find other means. I wasn't sitting around lying to myself that I was going to become a great cold caller, because I had tried that many times in my landscape business and never was good at it. So I've hired, appointment setters along the way, had some success with that. But again, direct mail, all the different things that you would do if you're not comfortable cold calling.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's just getting used to it, and some are chickens like me.
Yeah, so just another powerful approach, and maybe another tool in your tool bag. If, let's say, you're already getting some success via cold calling, or you've got a successful agency, maybe look for that influencer that does a conference, has meetings, has a mastermind group underneath them in your space that you can align with, because you can really accelerate your client growth. So great tip. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. So towards the end, as you grew the agency, what kind of strategies were you using to generate client leads and, of course, new clients on a consistent basis?
Well, the best thing that happened to me is when I joined the agency, and the first thing Josh says is webinars. And I had been talking about webinars. I had done one webinar in, 8 years, just for perspective. And in 2017, I did seven webinars. And I just followed the guidelines right out of the course and did my first webinar. And I had, 3 people show up. And my biggest attendance in all 7 was like 9. Okay, so never had great attendance, but here's what I want to tell you. Each of those webinars generated at least 2 customers.
Nice.
So typically I would get 1 customer that was on the webinar, and then I would get 1 that had seen the replay, because again, Josh, your little list of all the things I'm supposed to do, chop it up, put it out there. We were doing all those steps, so we would get one out for replay. So I'm sitting there looking at, again, a typical customer is going to generate somewhere. We have customers that have been with us 65 months, paying us $500 a month. Okay, so there's pretty good upside value, but at least $15,000 to $25,000 lifetime value came out of each of those individual customers. So take that times 2, and I would attribute that over the long term of creating anywhere from 25 to 50 grand per webinar.
Wow. And so just to kind of drill down on that, because I haven't gotten to that at this section in the updated training on the 7-figure agency blueprint. But ultimately, as you do this, right, as you join the associations, as you do your direct mail, as you put out your lead magnets, you're going to start to develop a list of prospects in your space. And if you follow the model, I suggest create your main keynote presentation, and that will get you so far. But really the best way to be relevant, to be timely, to be putting out new information to that list is to do webinars on a very consistent basis. And so I try and do a webinar a month, and usually it winds up being like 7 to 8 webinars throughout the course of the year. And the reason you do the webinar, first of all, you get an opportunity to send an email blast to the list. Hey, I've got a webinar coming up, right? Then you've got a reason to have some people live with you. Like Jeff said, he would close someone from the live event almost every time. You've got a reason to email the list after the webinar. Hey, you missed it, or in case you want to watch the replay, here's the link. And then you've got great content that you can load up on your blog, load up on social media, load up on Facebook, and that lives in perpetuity on the internet as an inbound lead generator for you. So, I can't say enough about the power of ongoing fresh content and the leveraging of webinars. And so that's one of the key benefits you have in this program is I give you my pre-done webinars, right? I give you the slides, I give you the emails I use to invite people, I share the social media ads that I've used. And so, for Jeff, that was a big lever for him that you can use as well. Just build your list and then follow the model, create webinars. And I'm sorry I went on a tangent. I'm not trying to take over your interview, but I'm really passionate about that topic, and I'm glad that you had such good results with it.
Well, I'm glad you spoke up, because that was a big turning point for me, because from that I also then started doing just weekly. I get 5 or 6 people, just like probably everybody that does good educational stuff online, and so every week I would take in Bernadette Coleman would be one example. She sends out a weekly thing. I would read through the things that I'm interested in. My constant question was always, how can I tell my customer the impact of this change, whatever the algorithm update or whatever it was. And so I got down to, my goal was a 3-minute email blast. So very simply, here's what's happened, here's how it affects you, and if you want to read more, go out and read more. And I didn't even worry about the fact that I was taking them over to Bernadette's stuff. I just wanted to give them, for most people, they're not going to click the link at the bottom that says tell me more anyway. I want to tell them why this is important to them, why they should be asking their webmaster about this. What's the impact now from Google going to 160 characters to 320 characters in the metadata? Mm-hmm. Your billboard just got twice the size on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So are you going to take advantage of it? How are you going to take advantage of it?
And so it's all around creating that expert status. So
right. And then the other big thing that I did is I knew a young lady. She actually she is one of my customers. She's the marketing director for a childcare center, and I approached her to come on board to be an intern. And she was working for $12 an hour, 15 to 20 hours worth of every week. And her whole job was to take it from the time I got done with the recording. She would grab it, she would chop it up, she would add the intro, the outro, send it off in Fiverr, get it transcribed, all the steps in the process. So 3 weeks after the webinar, they're done versus still in Jeff's to-do list.
Right.
So that was huge.
So you just took the whole process, and instead of making yourself the bottleneck, because there are a lot of steps to really syndicate the content the way I suggest you do it, and you found this intern, and she was paid something, correct? Or
yeah, $12 an hour.
Okay. And she's happy. She's got some additional spending money. You're happy because it's getting done and it's generating all of that social credibility and inbound lead opportunity for you.
Yeah, and the way we did it in the first month is we got as much done as we could in the 3 weeks while I was training her. And it wasn't quite complete. And then we did this, actually, I think I was a month behind when we started. But we just kept coming back and fixing what we hadn't done right for January or what we hadn't done right for February so that we would blanket that content out there. And so by the time we got done with this, I think it was the 7th webinar, they were all out there, all broken down, including podcasts.
Nice.
I never thought I'd do a podcast in my life.
Yep.
And
you did, but you didn't, right? You didn't sit down and say, okay, today's podcast is whatever. You took your webinar and you loaded up on iTunes, and there you got your podcast.
Oh, absolutely. But the other thing I want to say is, without your providing the slides, it would have never happened. Quite honestly, it never would have happened, because I just found, the very first one, you sent in the slides, I added the images that needed to be changed out. Again, I sent it for like $15 over to somebody on Fiverr. They made it look sweet. And off we went, and we had the first webinar. And all of that still took me the first time 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
To practice it and get it, the cadence and all the stuff. And so if I'd had to start out, here's a PowerPoint slide that's blank, I probably would have never got it done.
Right. First of all, come up with the topic, come up with what the bullet points are, fill in the presentation. So good, that helps. And for those of you guys that are wanting to do more of this stuff, I'm going to have a specific section in the members area on how to fully leverage these webinars. So right now the content is there. I'm going to be filling it in with the how-to and really how to syndicate which is not up yet. So, all right, awesome stuff. So you joined you created the strategic alliance. You started doing some webinars, fully syndicating those. Was that pretty much where the leads came from? Was there any other marketing strategies you were using?
We were doing some cold email, webinars, trade shows. That really was the top of what we were doing. Of course, all the basic SEO stuff as well. So we are ranking today fairly well in the niche and stuff. And then just working to put out expert status.
Good stuff. So I think we already answered this, but where did most of the clients come from on a month-to-month basis?
The associations.
Okay.
Either direct or indirect. The associations prior to 2017, webinars 2017.
Good. So what I would say, and this is going to be a common theme pretty much in all of these webinars. I'm a big advocate for it. There's ways to generate clients, right? And the most basic way is to cold call, but then the best way is to have inbound leads and opportunities like that. And so the way you do that is by getting involved in the association, putting out great content, leveraging lead magnets, doing direct mail at some level. And so, Jeff is sharing with you his blueprint, and it's pretty on point, right? Go join the association, get involved in their groups, and then put out relevant information that makes them think of you as the expert and come to you pre-positioned to buy. So now to the topic everybody's really interested and really excited about. This has really been popular in the group and in the chat on things, which is fulfillment, right? So now you've got this $42,000 a month in recurring revenue. You've got these hundreds of clients. How do you get all the work done? And what was your model for fulfilling for clients?
Well, we were before the sale 100% virtual, and we still are today at No Joke Marketing. So that is our mission, or a piece of our mission, is retaining the virtual status of the organization. For myself, I primarily used Upwork. I found that as a one owner type business, it was great to have the resource of just go there. Yes, you do pay more money on occasion, but I didn't have to go out and do a lot of recruiting per se. A lot of the information was already up to date about the people, what they were willing to do, capable of doing. And so Upwork was my go-to place. Now, that's not to say I hadn't tried other locations. And then the other one was local, local meaning anywhere in the United States, because my goal has always been is typically 3 to 4 overseas people for every one person in the U.S. Because somebody has to talk to the customer, somebody has to understand our culture and catch the nuances and everything from websites to content writing. You can get some great people. I've had people, and still do, Russia, Zimbabwe, Philippines, India, Bangladesh. So that's the team. Now we have some from Serbia as well. So kind of all over, and then looking at time zones. How do you cover? We're right now covering about, I think, 16 hours of the 24-hour day. Somebody's working on the team somewhere.
So a couple drill down questions on this. So a lot of the employees from Upwork, obviously there's this infinite supply of workers, but it's kind of a crapshoot at some level. You hire somebody, they're terrible, they don't show up, they don't complete the job. These are the challenges Dean and I never really actually figured out, right? That's why we have a full team in the United States at our office in Miami. So how do you get around that? How do you find the good quality workers?
Well, in your application process on Upwork, you specifically ask them to list their top 3 strengths or weak points. But the other big things are looking for simple things like my applications always say, please address this to Dear Sadie Mae. So that's my cat. And I clearly say in there as well, if you don't correctly address this, you won't be considered. And about half of them are self-selecting. They just don't get considered because they don't read the instructions. And if they can't read the instructions, at that point, what do you expect from them when you let them loose? Because, again, perspective. I mean, today's a work day. I've talked to the team less than 40 minutes out of the day, and it's about half of my day or more. So there's 17 or 18 people out there working away. Yeah, there's managers in between, and supervisors, but most of them are just working. And then it's just, as I said in the other webinar that I did for you about a year ago, I guess it was.
Which I'll link to, guys, in the Facebook group. I'll link to that because he really outlines his entire offshore model and how he manages the people on Upwork.
Yeah, and so the big thing though is you got to treat they might be freelancers from the way you pay them, but you have to treat them like a team, and you have to make sure that when the new person first comes on board, for example, everybody on the team has to make 20 minutes and reach out to that person and introduce themselves, tell them stuff that's not about the business. Where did I grow up? What do I like to do? All of those kinds of things. So we start building the team culture at that point. We make sure that we have what I refer to as water cooler moments, because in Josh's office, and I've been there a couple times, you can meet over the water cooler and you can chat about things. Well, you don't have that in a virtual team, so you have to stimulate that kind of spontaneous conversation, which is where you usually find out some of the most interesting things about your company. When somebody blurts something out over the water cooler that you had no idea was happening. So
right.
work at that as well.
How do you create those water cooler moments in a virtual environment?
Just being willing to stop everything you're doing when you start listening for the signal, if you will. Your team member maybe makes a little snarky comment or something, and you're like, what's going on and how's your day? And so we use Zoom exclusively now, and so you just get them on Zoom and chat with them. Turn on those, the cameras so you can look each other in the eye, just as if you were in the conference room together. And then I task also and require the management team to do that as well, and let me know when they do it, so I'm making sure that enough of that is happening. And of course, no different than in the U.S., every country has their sport or event. So as those happen, if you're paying attention and bringing those little, mentions into the group meetings that you have, that helps. I mean, we have a huddle or whatever you want to call it every day. Ours today is a little different than when we did it before, because we're a bigger organization today. In the past, it was just 4 days a week, 15 minutes. The project manager, the senior project manager, runs the huddle. I participate, but I don't run the huddle. Because what I'm doing is I'm listening for all of what I call the tells. So, when somebody says something to the effect that been trying to get access to this domain for 3 weeks, instead of that just passing by, I'm making that note to then offline I'll get together with them and see what the obstacle is and try to help them overcome it.
So that's pretty interesting. You said a couple things here that are pretty powerful. With the use of Zoom.us, or this same platform we're on right now, you can have the entire team from Bangladesh and wherever else, India, all come together and have a daily huddle. That way, despite the fact that you're all virtual, they're all working, they're all responsible to sit down in front of the screen and kind of tell you what's going on, what they're focused on for the day.
Yeah, so on Mondays, so I'll tell you what we do now, because I think it's an interesting evolution. So Mondays is the whole team. So we have 20 people, and we use a concept that I've promoted for a lot of years. What are your 3 big things you're working on today, and what are your 3 little things that you're working on, which can be as simple as I need to send an email to get that logo so the team can work. And so on Mondays, everybody talks about their number one thing they're trying to accomplish for the day. This is the whole team, and then in this last 30 minutes, and then the last half, typically about 15 minutes, is training. Okay. So can be anywhere from teamwork training to corporate philosophy training. What do we mean by this particular core value? Josh, I know you guys have a lot of meetings, but how frequently do you actually pull out one of your core values and talk it through for 5 minutes?
Right.
So that's Monday. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have a 15-minute leadership meeting that's about 5 people. And then we jump out of that immediately. We're still using Zoom. We jump out of that. And then the web dev team goes into their own huddle, if you will. And the marketing team goes into their own huddle. And then finally, we wrap it up on Fridays with the team's only huddle. So there's no leadership meeting because they're talking on Fridays about, what did we accomplish this week? What are we trying to get done next week? What did we, what fell through the cracks that we need to recover yet today on Friday? Because again, when you promised it this week, you still have over half a day to get that promise kept if possible.
So I mean, very interesting stuff. One of the things you explained to me in the past, I think would be useful to the others, is the distinction between freelance type people and, despite being not W-2 employees, still still full-time members of your team. Can you kind of talk through that distinction?
Yeah. So one of the things that I see that have had experience with is if you're speaking to quote unquote a freelancer, like you would necessarily talk to a subcontractor, which is, again, remember, somebody that you're employing that then has multiple people under them. They're not necessarily looking to become part of your culture. But if you're talking to a person working out of their home in whatever country they are, they're trying to connect to you. And so if you wake up every morning and think of them as just a guy that does whatever for you, you're missing that huge commitment. And so I don't care how they get paid. Some get W-2, some get through Upwork, some get paid direct. It really doesn't matter to me. Everybody's on the team. They're always called team members. They're always referred to being on the team. And one of the things that I always say is, their responsibility and mine every day is to help the other team members be successful. And that's a huge thing, because as soon as somebody starts whining or sniveling about, hey, my teammate isn't doing this or that, my first question always is, did you talk to him about it?
Yeah.
Because we have cultural differences, we have language differences, and the biggest thing, as we all know, if you're honest with yourself, is most employees fail because you didn't train them correctly.
Right.
It isn't, they were excited. They showed up for a job interview. They sat through whatever crazy process you had to employ them. So you have to believe you hired the right person. Now you just got to make sure they can be successful. So
you train them right. I like that. So everybody's responsibility is to help the other team members be successful. And as long as you keep that at the fore as a member of my team, everyone's going to succeed.
Yeah. And, there's some that, again, will self-select out because they don't want to be on a team or they don't like the, hours a day. So we have an overlap every day that everybody on the team has to work. So they all have to be available 10 Eastern. I got to do the math here because I'm now always thinking in Eastern to 2 Eastern.
Okay.
So there's a 4-hour window that I don't care where you live in the world, that overlaps. We have our meetings. That's where we do the majority of our work. Some of them are finishing their shift during that period of time, and others are just starting their shift. It doesn't really matter.
So how do you make that distinction with someone on Upwork? So I'm just getting started. I'm trying to think. Okay, I need someone to help me with a website, or I need someone to do some SEO for me. Your mind goes straight to, I need to hire a freelancer. I need to hire a company that can do this for me. There's a big distinction between that and somebody I'm hiring off Upwork to be my full-time employee that is paid through Upwork.
Well, when you're first smaller, obviously you're hiring that guy to do that one website you need or whatever the case is. So you're not at that point looking to build the team.
Right.
But I can tell you the first 10 websites we built in childcare, that gentleman is with us still today and is our lead technician in building websites and design and everything. So once I hired him the first time, the next website I went back to him. I didn't reshop it. I was happy with his quality. Could I have maybe gotten $1 cheaper? Yeah. I mean, all those things are possible, but that's the beginning. And then, 6 months into it, if I brought somebody new on board, I could say, hey, meet with Amon and talk to Amon how we're going to develop websites, because he is the lead guy. And so just never worry about how I pay them.
Awesome. So for, I mean, if you kind of look at this as an evolution, you do go on Upwork, you find a couple freelancers, you give them projects, you pay them. If they do good, you try and use them again and again until you're ready for them to be full time. How do you make that transition from, hey, I'm paying you piecemeal, to, hey, would you be interested in being a full time member of my team, fully dedicated to my agency?
Just have a conversation, because pretty much the ones you're looking for, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a continuous amount of revenue. So, and be aware, if they go on to Upwork and the person says that their hourly rate is $15 an hour, they're factoring in the fact that they're maybe only working 10 hours a week, and they're getting $15, and that supports their lifestyle wherever they may live. So it's nothing wrong with approaching them and saying, hey, if I could give you consistently 20 hours a week or 25 hours a week, will you work for $11 an hour, $12 an hour? Because at the end of the day, we all have the same issue. We got to bring enough, and this is my landscape days, we have to bring enough home to mama to feed the family and pay the bills.
Yeah.
And some people get really focused around their hourly rate, but the ones you want are the ones that are focused on what do they need for a week to pay their bills and keep mama happy,
Yeah.
And they're out there, and you just start accumulating them, and then that's what makes it fun. By the time you have your third or fourth one, your team is selling you to them.
Right. You need to be part of this. This is a great company. We have meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that fun stuff. So the other important distinction that you talked about is, so for web design, I'm sure some SEO stuff, citations, you have this Upwork team that could be anywhere because language barrier isn't an issue. But when it comes to client relationship management and being able to be the project coordinator per se, it sounds like that's someone you hire virtually, but in the United States. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Is that someone you'd still find on Upwork, or would that maybe be something you put out an ad and do a traditional hire process for?
About 50-50. Okay. I've hired both off of Upwork, and Upwork has changed just recently that you can actually check the box that says you'll only accept U.S.-based freelancers.
Okay.
And that's changed things pretty dramatically, because in the past, even though if you said in the subject line U.S.-based only, you'd still have the majority of your applicants from overseas. And so you get back to the little tricks of the game. So if you're trying to hire in the U.S., one of the stipulations is you must be able to, on a daily basis, go to a U.S. post box and drop off letters. And so when they say, well, I'm in Bangladesh, and you're like, so where's the mailbox? Well, they have no ability to mail in the U.S. So they, right, again, immediately eliminate themselves. Plus, a lot of people just don't apply because they get it,
Right.
And, of course, they never have to do that, but those are some tidbits along the way here. But
so, I mean, one of my hang-ups on this would be, and kind of walk me through it, would be, is it not the case if somebody's on Upwork, they're really looking for one-off projects, they're not necessarily looking for, especially a United States person, like if I live in Plainfield, Illinois, and I'm on Upwork, I would think that's probably because I'm looking just for some side work. Have you found that not to be the case?
Well, some are, but you got to remember there's a big shift in the whole 40-hour one employer kind of concept. Mm-hmm. And you'll see a lot of millennials are perfectly fine working 28 hours for one person and picking up another job where they're working another 12 to 20 hours for a second company, either related to the industry or totally unrelated. So a lot of what I see initially, so my last marketing manager out of Houston, that's exactly, he was on Upwork just trying to find odd jobs because he had another job, but then that job was at a point where you either had to commit more or step away, and he chose to step away to me. And so he came on, and at the time he was working 45 hours a week exclusively. Wow. So they're out there, but I'm going to say it's all how they came into it. I mean, because the other thing is if you want to use Upwork as your payment platform, you can actually bring your own employees into that platform, and they get special discount pricing and stuff. So
Okay.
It's pretty versatile, but yeah, you can find U.S. based, overseas based.
So the base of your team would be coming through Upwork, um, paid through Upwork. Is there any secret sauce to tracking? Because that's another hang up of mine with virtual team. So here in my office, I can walk into the ops team and look at my guys and know what they're up to and kind of have a sense of productivity. With a virtual team, for all I know, they're sitting at their computer doing anything, not necessarily doing work. So how do you track that with 20 people all kind of scattered all over the country?
Well, Upwork has their own built-in technology for that. Screenshot every 6 minutes or something like that. And if you're not going through Upwork, I would recommend Time Doctor.
Okay.
But there's other programs. But the bottom line is we just shifted to Time Doctor because it integrates with Teamwork, which is our project manager. So a big thing for 2018 and beyond is no joke is working to actually job cost. So we want to know down to the 15 minutes, how long do these customers take of our time, and which ones are profitable and which ones need to go away. And we kind of haphazardly guess at that right now, but I want to know what I'm getting paid by a customer and if they're worth our time and energy, because we're getting paid well enough from them.
Sure.
So there's not that, but at the end of the day, Josh, it really always comes down to trust.
Yeah.
Because every one of my team members, I gave them up to 30% of the time they could work off the meter, because there's nothing worse than trying to sit there and let's say you're writing and you like to hand write versus type on a screen. If you're my writer, in every 6 minutes you got to reach over and click the mouse so that it's registering the time that you're working.
Right.
So it's coming up with that balance. It's also coming up with hey, it's Saturday afternoon, you're on your phone, you're the only guy that can help me out, thank you very much. You share again on this little mobile device, and I'm not stressing about that you didn't turn on the Upwork timer first. You manually put in an hour, and that's fine. So, and it's no different. I had an office like what you have.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much know when people are producing, when they're not, when they're on the team. Are they asking the right questions, intelligent questions? There's nothing I hate worse than people bluffing their way through what they know.
Right.
Because I don't care if they're inside four walls or across the world, you have no idea what they have in their head, what they may have done in a previous career, and how that might help your company. But nothing worse than saying, oh, I'm an expert SEO, and within a day, they're a junior SEO tech at best,
Right.
Doesn't take very long to figure it out.
Awesome. Well, great stuff. Any other critical insights on the topic of managing, building a virtual team?
No, it's not as hard as you think, and then you have to keep evolving with it. Yeah, but it's really making, my opinion, you make that commitment. You're either going to go virtual or you're going to go four walls, and get really good at one or the other. Because the problem is if you have 2 or 3 virtual people and the rest are inside, it's a real struggle, because you forget about them. Then they reach out to you and say, when's the meeting starting? And you're like, well, the meeting was over 30 minutes ago. And they're like, well, how come you didn't ping me? And, it just gets really bizarre, because so even when we had an office 2.5 years ago, everybody had to go into their office to talk, just like everybody was virtual. We simulated virtual. Because there's nothing worse in a conference room. 2 people are looking at, they're seeing body language and all the things that go with it. And then you bring the third person in and you can't see him at all, and he can't see you, and he can't see the big frown on your face or the smirk or whatever's, telling this is sarcasm or whatever it may be.
Excellent. All right. Well, some great tips there on how to build a virtual team. Again, there's a video Jeff did about a year ago, I think now, but he really just outlined his entire model, how he hires, how he retains, how he keeps people engaged. So make sure you check that out if you want to hear more insights on this particular topic and or, of course, this conversation continues inside the Facebook group. And if you have follow-up questions for Jeff, he's an active moderator in the group, and so he's there to help you out and answer some of those questions. So now to the next really sexy topic, which is you accomplished the entire entrepreneur life cycle, which most people dream of, right? To build an agency, have it become an asset that has some value, and then actually sell it off to somebody else. So talk to us about how that worked and how you made that happen.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was flying to Miami back on November 7th last year, and I'm like, I'm struggling, just one of those, I'm trapped in my own little box of my own creation, and I need to do something different. And as I was flying, I live in Reno, and as I was flying over, I'm like, I need a business partner. I need to sell this thing. And there's a whole long story to that. I had a business partner a couple of years ago and stuff that I'll gladly talk to anybody about that wants to. But anyway, so thought about it on the 8th, which is my day. I was always hanging out a day before going into the mastermind. And when I got into the mastermind, I specifically asked Josh if I could go last in presenting my hot seat. Because I said to him, I think I'm going to present something that nobody else is going to present today. And so I stood up and said, I either need a partner or I want to sell. And the team helped me kind of walk through it, what that would mean, what that would look like. And the next day, Michael Tasner and I met for lunch, and he expressed an interest. And that was the, 10th of November, and we had the deal signed by Thanksgiving. And we were merging together, or we started merging the week after Thanksgiving. So 22 days or some crazy thing like that.
And that's awesome. It also kind of speaks to the power of mastermind or of being around other like-minded, successful people. You have access to opportunities that you might not have had as easily access to otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could not imagine how to go out, even though the group shared with me ways to present that you're available for sale. I just could not even imagine having to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, when I sold my landscape business back in 2006, I found a local competitor and sold to them as well. So it was a method that I was familiar with.
Sure. So any specifics that you can share on how to set your company up so that it has maximum valuation, or any lessons that might have served you better had you known in retrospect?
Well, I obviously wasn't planning to sell, so I didn't do a whole lot of setting up per se, but I kind of entered this when I started the agency with, I got to get systems and processes in place. I know that's going to be the value in your business, is your systems and processes, because the reality is, take a 2-week vacation, and if you're touching base with your office even every other day, you're not ready to sell yet, because you need to be able to stand up and walk away. And it can be done, because I sold my $5 million landscape business. I spent 18 days in the office and never talked to them again. But I had the systems, processes, managers in place, all of those things. Now, I didn't get quite that far with this, and some may ask why the others. So part of the problem is I have some physical health issues, so it's just been, doing it on my own has been more of a struggle than I could handle physically. So it was just time, it was time for me to look at a different way. But yeah, identify the value, figure out, EBITDA is usually the best formula out there. You can read about it pretty much anywhere, and you can calculate it right off your profit and loss statement. And so figure out, what you're worth. And I forget what the number, but I think I got about 3.5 times EBITDA.
Nice.
Which I was satisfied with based on where I was at. And then I agreed to come over and spend at least a year with Michael, making sure everything was up, running, in place, merging the companies together, the processes and systems. Because obviously I want to see Michael be successful going forward. And it's in some ways a nice little break for me, because I'm not responsible for every single crazy thing in the agency.
Right.
The paychecks are now happening without me being involved, and the accounting's happening. And so it's just a nice little break. But make sure your systems are in place. Have some kind of way that you're generating new revenue streams, so you have some kind of incremental growth going on. If you're showing up with an agency that's been flat for the last 3 years, what are they gonna think about you, your value, and your ability, to provide them a great new opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
But also remember, for almost everybody, every experience that I've ever had doing sales myself or participating as a business coach, everybody that buys. One of the major reasons is they see a way that they can do it better than you're doing. Whether that's they can get cheaper insurance payments, or they can merging these two web dev teams together, we can eliminate 3 people and we're going to see opportunity there. Or I have a better marketing and sales system that will complement the organization of the fulfillment team. So just always remember that. Try to understand what their opportunities are going to be, and go after an agency that can fill in where you might be weak.
Mm-hmm.
2 great production companies are going to struggle to merge together. A great sales company merging with a production company is going to be a much better benefit for everybody.
Right. So look for that opportunity where your company would be more useful because they need that. Like if you're great at sales and you find a company that's great at execution, then they might pay a little higher because they know they can sell it and plug into your fulfillment model.
Absolutely. So I'm going to use your business as an example. If I were a plumbing and HVAC agency and I was small, let's say I'm about $400,000, I would start to get to know you, whether through the mastermind or whatever, and I would figure out, an open conversation, how you kind of have your organization, and then I'd be looking to model similar things so that, 5 years from now when I knock on the door and say, hey, Josh, I want you to buy me, you're like, that'll bolt right in here. I can see it already.
Right.
And I'm not the only guy that talks about that. Look out there, find 2 or 3 entities that you respect and think might purchase you, and then do some of the stuff in the background similar to them.
Yeah, good tips on that front. So, kind of moving to the next topic, you've bought and sold 2 companies. You're obviously really well versed in operations and virtual teams. What books, training programs have really had the biggest impact on your success?
Well, I've been through the strategic coach for 9 years, so that was good, and learning how to manage my time as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that had a huge impact on me through the years. And that's actually one of the big things I'm looking forward to, because again, as a sole owner, it's kind of hard to implement a lot of that stuff, but I actually can implement that. Just constantly reading, doing a lot more video today. The mastermind, when I walked into the mastermind in 2016 and signed up, I made a 12-month commitment to the only thing I was going to study was things that the mastermind produced or referred. And so the different Chet Holmes books that you've recommended along the way, as well as the course and other resources that, I may recognize something that's in your teaching model now that might be a Frank Kern thing, for example, or a Aaron Fletcher thing, and then going out and studying those particular people at a greater degree. So that's really what I've been doing for the most part.
Okay, awesome. And so then, I guess as we wrap this up, what additional nuggets, what other suggestions would you have for that digital marketing agency owner that's just looking to try to get to the next level?
Get involved in something like a mastermind that's, again, agency specific. That was huge for me. Niche. I was way too slow to commit to niching. And, I paid the price for that. And then really work hard to make friends within a small, again, under 100 size group is, I guess, what I would say, even if they're your competitors. And that core group, in my case, there's about a half dozen guys that out of the mastermind, we've become pretty good friends, and we openly share information. and here's my newest email I'm going to send out. What do you think? Oh, you totally forgot to put this in or that in. Those sound like things your team should catch, but it's amazing how sometimes we all can get kind of blind after working on a project for a while. Yeah. So, reach out, get involved. In this group, everybody here is a member of this group. Are you posting a question pick Friday morning or whatever, post one question that I have in my mind to the group and ask for some help on it. It's one of the most giving groups I'm a part of. So,
yeah, you can only get so much as you ask, right? So don't be ashamed and don't be bashful to ask for help and get the help and support of the others in the program for sure.
Well, and then when you approached me to help moderate the group, that told me your commitment to the whole project as well, because you still own an agency as well, and there are some weeks that you get crazy busy, and then didn't want to see the group just sitting there
stagnant,
languishing, stagnant. So I'm proud to step back into that role again. I took the last 60 days and just focused on merging the company, but now we'll be back in there. You guys will see me a lot more. That was my focus.
Awesome.
Biggest thing that one of the questions was, what would I not do again? And I would not spend any time outside of the niche. Find the niche. Even if you change 3 times along the way, do everything you can in the niche. And I would say till you get to $1 million. When you got your little business humming away at $1 million, I was about 550 at the end of this last year, 600 somewhere in that neighborhood. And I still had enough to learn to get to $1 million. I didn't need to go jump over and take on another niche and get distracted. And quite honestly, I made that mistake last year, and it is one of the factors in why I decided to sell. It was just one of those, here I am again getting myself distracted. I'm doing pretty good in childcare, and now I'm going to go do roofers. And there's something to be said for that, but I know I could have built just childcare to $1 million, and then it would have been easier to put that particular division more on autopilot.
Yeah.
Why I built a second one, if that was my choice.
Yeah, great point. I mean, stay in your lane. If you're looking at the analogy of the rocket ship, right? The rocket ship, it's got boosters underneath it, and if all those boosters are pointed down and they fire at the same time, that rocket ship takes off and it goes into space and it kind of coasts. Whereas if you've got a rocket ship and just one of those boosters is pointing in a different direction, there's going to be the same amount of force, but it never gets off the ground, or it never gets to that critical mass that it needs to. And so, what Jeff said, there's a tremendous insight. Just if you're going to focus on a niche, focus on that niche and really go after it relentlessly until you are at a point of critical mass, at which point you probably won't even want to tinker in other niches.
Oh, exactly, because you then by that point are the expert. And just think about using your rocket analogy. Every rocket you've ever seen that actually got off the ground and took a hard right turn, what happened to them? They crashed.
Yeah.
Yep, something went wrong. So my point there is, great, at $500,000, I'm now making that hard right turn into a new niche. And how much of my energy, cash flow, all those things would it have taken? So,
absolutely. Well, I mean, this has been an awesome interview. Jeff shared tremendous insights on how he picked his niche, how he landed his first 5 clients, what he does and what he's done that has worked well to attract customers, how he manages a completely virtual team. So, Jeff, thank you so much for your generosity and for your sharing. For those of you guys listening, take a minute, post in the comments, tag Jeff, send him a personal message thanking him for his willingness to share. Don't let it get lost on you that somebody does this in a vacuum and they know people are listening. They want to hear back. They want to get feedback. So spend a couple minutes. If you got value from this, thank Jeff. Send him a personal note. And anything else you want to add before we close the interview, Jeff?
No, there's a couple of questions up here, but let me answer those.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely address these questions before we close. But I'm just saying, like the core part of the interview.
No, I'm good. I'm here. Ask away. PM me. I'm pretty much an open book. I'll tell you what I've done And just one correction, Josh, I have bought, sold, and merged 10 different businesses.
Okay, so I undercut you. I apologize for that. 10 companies. That's awesome.
So if you're thinking about merging, I can talk you through that. I've done that 4 times,
So we're gonna get to the questions. We have a bunch of you guys live, which is awesome. Thank you guys. If you happen to somehow be watching this video and you're not a member of the Seven Figure Agency, and or maybe you're listening to the recording of this on iTunes, definitely check out Seven Figure Agency at sevenfigureagency.com. You can get a video training series that'll kind of walk you through our model, how we were able to scale to 7 figures, make the Inc. 5000 list 2 times in a row, and get access to really our model. So that's sevenfigureagency.com.